On that day, that particular day, so many different emotions just came to the surface. Even losing Payton in the process, knowing that he was not going to be there was an emotional moment for me because I had met him like in 92, 93 in Dallas at a Doak Walker Award. And for the first time, and I got a chance to, some people go ask for an autograph and pictures and stuff. I got that, but I wanted to know, I needed some insight. I needed to know what it was going to take and how I had to work in order to get it. So I asked all kinds of questions. I wanted him to break down his workout regimen, his recovery regimen, his eating habits, his sleeping patterns. I wanted to know everything. And he just downloaded to me. Just downloaded it free. And from that point forward, I knew I was on a serious mission.
I mean, I asked Walter Payton, I said, Walter, why are you running so hard out in practice, in pre-practice? You're only gonna play 8 plays in the Pro Bowl. And he turned to me and said, I'm currently breaking the tackles that are impossible to break next season. I'm building a memory map to an anticipated future. What did he just say?
Holy cow.
I was shocked.
Yeah,
and I was like, whoa.
The most feared man in the NFL never said a word. He didn't trash talk, didn't intimidate, didn't threaten. He just showed up before everyone else, left after everyone else, and pushed himself to a place his own teammates were too afraid to follow.
He's still here. The hill has now been replaced and people are out there hitting golf balls and having a good time. But I think it's more than that. It's that struggle, that challenge. And it's the way we approach it. And if we can approach it like my father did, we'll have a pretty good chance, I think, of being successful.
When someone dies young, they tend to deify him and they tend to make it very easy. He was this great guy and he died young. It oversimplifies a very complicated life. And I actually think he was very textured, very detailed, not just as black and white. He's always been portrayed in 2 ways. Great football player.
Walter Payton becomes the National Football League all-time leading rusher.
And he was such a prankster.
I don't care who you are. How much money you got? We don't care. We're Chicago Bears. Bye-bye.
And I almost consider that an insult to who he really was, because he was so much more than that.
Walter Payton, 13 seasons, 16,726 rushing yards, 1 game missed, numbers that don't tell the real story, because the real story isn't about what he did on Sundays. It's about what he did when nobody was watching, what his teammates witnessed in silence for years, and what they're only now willing to say out loud. These words didn't come from a press conference. No publicists, no prepared statements, no carefully worded tributes designed to protect a reputation. Mike Ditka, one of the hardest men in NFL history, had his voice break on the phone an hour after Payton died. Not talking about a touchdown, not talking about a record, talking about a block. A single block Walter Payton threw to protect a teammate. That's what came to mind first. That's what broke him.
This is like my hero growing up. That's just the will to never stop. See, that ain't skill, that's heart. He gave me something that I once realized that I didn't have, and that's what I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the strongest, but then I bumped into something called work ethic.
I have a visual in my mind of him running that hill with the Rules headband on, and I said, you know what, if this works for Walter, I'm gonna try it. And I started doing hills. When I built my house in San Diego, I built a hill in the backyard. And the whole point in it was to kind of put yourself through things that you've never been through before. And I always told myself when I got tired and I wanted to quit, this is the time where you have to step up. What would Walter do? Walter wouldn't quit.
Jim McMahon played 6 seasons behind Payton, 6 years of watching this man pick up blitzes that would have ended careers, linebackers coming free, full speed, and Payton stepping up, absorbing it every time without a word. Never once asked for the ball. Mike Singletary, Deacon Jones, Tony Dorsett. These are not men who give praise easily. These are men who built careers on violence and competition, and every single one of them talks about Payton the same way, like they're describing something they still haven't fully processed. What you're about to hear isn't admiration, it isn't tribute, it's testimony from men who watched him up close and asked themselves the same question over and over. How was any of this possible?
I had gotten a chance to know Walter, and I had a chance to really sit down and talk to a living legend and ask all of the pertinent questions that you want to ask of an individual that have gone places where you're trying to go. And we just had a candid conversation, and finally I said, who do you think will break your record? He says, there's two guys that I believe that have a chance to break my record. Barry Sanders is one, and you are the other one. I looked him square dead in his eyes. I said, I don't know what Barry wants, but I want your record. And he said, go get it. That was that. And when he passed, I think part of me passed along with him, but the sense of responsibility, a greater responsibility came upon me. All I ever wanted to do was to not only break the record, but to make him proud in the process, because I never forget these words. Whoever break this record, they're gonna bust their heart trying to get there. And I understand what it means.
Every single defender who lined up against Walter Payton went through the same exact process. Study the film, know the tendencies, trust the preparation, and then Sunday arrived and none of it mattered, not one bit. Here's what the tape never showed. Payton ran a 4.640 by NFL standards. That's ordinary. Defenders knew this. They'd seen slower backs get handled all season. So when number 34 broke the huddle, there was no panic. No alarm bells. Then he hit the hole. Veteran safeties, men who had played this game for a decade, described a feeling they never experienced against anyone else. A clean angle, perfect positioning, textbook tackling form, and then something shifted. Something that had no business happening at that speed, at that angle, in that space, happened anyway. And suddenly they were on the ground wondering what just hit them. He didn't just make you miss, he made you feel stupid for trying.
Well, before I played my first preseason game as a player, my rookie year, I was sitting by my locker and Walter Payton came up to me and asked me if I was nervous. I said, no, I'm not nervous. You know, it's just preseason, you know. But I really was nervous, very nervous. And, you know, almost like to the point where I thought I was going to throw up in my helmet just sitting there. And Walter said, I get nervous before every game. Every game I get nervous. And then I take my first hit, and then I'm fine. And then he got up and walked away, and that was very profound to me. Wow, Walter Payton, you know, gets nervous, and that's okay.
9 Pro Bowls, 7 first-team All-Pro honors, voted on by the same men he embarrassed every Sunday, and they voted unanimously every time. Because some things you just can't argue with. But the elusiveness wasn't even the thing that kept defenders up at night. It was the moment he stopped running away from you and ran straight at you instead. First impressions only tell you what he was. What these men are only now willing to explain is why.
He had a gentle spirit, honestly. He was easy to talk to. He sent you flowers and wonderful cards. He was quite romantic. We would go discoing all the time. He loved to dance. He was really good. As a matter of fact, he's known for dancing on Soul Train.
Once you put wisdom with will on top of talent, you get what you call sweetness.
How many people had the guts to wear like their nickname? I like roll around with your nickname. I like to call myself The Difference. That's my nickname, and I'm just gonna get a headband of like The Difference and wear it around. No way, I don't have the guts. But the sweetness is just as a simple nickname. Has like a different you know, everybody's like the Iron Fist or the Curtain, the Ramrod or the Hit, you know, whatever, like people give all these like nicknames that aren't like good. I mean, he was a sweetness. Somebody gave me a photograph of the hill, and where it's just worn in, where he's like just run around and round and round and round and round. And growing up, I never really felt like I was great at anything. I felt like I was good at a lot of different things. And I felt like the only way I was ever gonna be great at anything is hard work. And so he kind of became my idol or my inspiration for hard work and for what it took to be successful.
What made Walter Payton different wasn't speed, wasn't size, wasn't some freak athletic gift that no other human possessed. Plenty of backs came into this league faster, bigger, more explosive on paper. Every single one of them retired before him. Payton ran a 4.640, by NFL standards, ordinary. Defenders knew this, coordinators knew this, and yet every single scheme built to contain him failed, season after season, year after year, because what Payton possessed couldn't be measured at the combine, couldn't be scouted on film, and couldn't be taken away no matter how well you prepared. He built the stutter step out of necessity, pure survival instinct, a fraction of a second hesitation so precise, so perfectly timed that it didn't just make defenders miss, it made their own bodies betray them.
Michael Jordan changed the game. Walter Payton didn't change the game. He just played it better than everybody else.
There were questions about whether he could play at that level from Jackson State.
His girlfriend, his college girlfriend, Connie, who would later marry, is at Jackson State. He's very lonely. His mother comes to live with him, so he's living with his mother in an apartment, and he hates it.
Coming to Chicago from Jackson, Mississippi, it's like, another world. When he first came up, he was, kind of a guy that walked around and didn't talk to too many people.
For 6 consecutive seasons, 1976 through 1981, Walter Payton led the NFL in rushing attempts. 6 years. Defenses had the scouting reports, had the film, had the game plans, knew the tendencies, knew the formations, knew number 34 was getting the ball. Didn't matter. Teams stopped trying to simply stop him and started inventing entirely new systems just to slow him down. 8 men in the box, spy assignments dedicated to one player, double teams before the snap even happened, defensive coordinators losing sleep on Saturday nights drawing up schemes that had one singular purpose: contain Walter Payton. His response to all of it? 10 seasons, 1,000 rushing yards or more, every single time. But here's what the stat sheet never captured. Defenders didn't just talk about individual plays. They talked about the fourth quarter, the moment in the fourth quarter when Payton was somehow running harder than he did in the first, when his legs were fresher than theirs, when everything they had thrown at him for 3 hours had done absolutely nothing to slow him down. That's when the frustration turned into something else entirely, something quieter, something they struggled to admit out loud, respect so deep it bordered on fear. They prepared for a football player. What walked through that tunnel on Sundays was something completely different. And to understand what that actually was, you have to go back to a hill outside Chicago. There was a hill outside Chicago. No cameras, no coaches, no crowd, just a steep mound of earth that Walter Payton used to break himself down and rebuild from scratch. Every single offseason, without fail, without complaint, without an audience. His teammates knew about it. Some of them tried to join him. They didn't last long. What they described wasn't a workout. It wasn't training in any conventional sense of the word. It was Payton sprinting up that hill until his legs stopped working, and then doing it again and again.
Now, you're Chicago Bears legends. Who's on Brian Urlacher's Mount Rushmore for greatest Chicago Bears players all time? You can include yourself.
Walter Payton.
That's one.
That's it. That's all you need, Walter Payton.
What about Ditka? What about Gale Sayers?
Dick. Okay, I'll put Dick in. Dick was right there. Butkus.
Butkus.
Yeah, but Walter Payton, man, you can't. That's it for me. When I think of Chicago Bears, I think of Walter Payton.
Certainly, man. He's probably the greatest football player of all time because he could kick, he could block, he can run.
He can do everything. But he's just the best. He might be the best player ever. You're right. You said that correctly. He's the best player to ever put on a football jersey, in my opinion.
Past the point where any rational human being would have stopped. Past the point where the body sends every signal it has, screaming at you to quit. He never quit. And that's the part that got inside his teammates' heads. Not the sprints themselves. The silence. Payton never grimaced dramatically, never made a show of the suffering. He just kept going at the same pace while everyone around him was on their knees gasping, with the same expression on his face he wore on 1st and 10 at Soldier Field, like it was nothing. Like stopping simply never occurred to him as an option. 1 game missed, 13 seasons, and it wasn't because Walter Payton never got hurt. He played through injuries that ended other men's careers without saying a single word about it. Because in his mind, pain was not a reason. Pain was just the Hill talking. He never announced that standard, never posted it on a locker room wall, never gathered his teammates and delivered a speech about toughness and sacrifice. He just showed up before everyone else, left after everyone else, and ran up that hill until the sun went down. That silence, that relentless, unspoken, impossible standard was the most terrifying form of leadership anyone in that building ever witnessed, because it left his teammates with nowhere to hide. Before the sun came up over Chicago, he was already there. No cameras, no contract incentives, no coaching staff watching with a clipboard. Just a steep, unforgiving mound of earth and Walter Payton, alone in the dark, doing something that had no business being humanly possible. His teammates knew about it. Some of them showed up to train with him once. Just once. What they witnessed wasn't a workout. Calling it a workout is almost insulting. It was Payton systematically dismantling his own body, sprinting up that hill until his legs buckled, until his lungs burned through his chest, until every biological alarm system a human being possesses was screaming at him to stop. He never stopped.
He was the best blocking back, I can say that unequivocally, that I've ever seen. I can still see the game up in Minnesota that we're losing, and McMahon calls an audible, and as he's going to throw the ball, there's a linebacker coming ready to kill him. And all of a sudden, Walter steps up and levels the guy.
I do think he's the most complete back that I've ever seen. Taught himself how to be a really good receiver. He wasn't when he came into the league, but he got better at it.
Payton over the shoulder catch, saved for the touchdown!
He jumped over the line of scrimmage right at the goal line. And I said, the Bears are no longer a one-man team, they're one Superman team.
The day that he broke the single-game rushing record, before the game, he was laying on the floor in the locker room, covered up with towels, shivering and shaking. He had the flu.
It was a good story because I used it with all my players all the time when they weren't feeling good. I just tell them that Walter set the single-game rushing record with 104 temperature. And so you need to go get dressed.
And that, right there, is what broke his teammates psychologically. Not the hill itself, not the sprints, the silence. Payton never grimaced for an audience, never made theater out of the suffering. While grown men, professional NFL athletes in peak physical condition, were collapsed on the ground, gasping. Regular season tells you how good a player is. January tells you who they really are. 19 playoff games, Soldier Field in the dead of winter, frozen turf, 40,000 people screaming, a franchise that had waited decades for something worth celebrating. And number 34, carrying it all on his back, snap after snap, year after year, refusing to let Chicago die easy. But none of it, not 1 yard, not one carry, defines Walter Payton more than a single moment in New Orleans, January 26th, 1986, Super Bowl 20. The Bears didn't just beat New England, they humiliated them 46-10. One of the most savage, complete, dominant performances in Super Bowl history, confetti raining down, a city finally exhaling after years of heartbreak. And Walter Payton, 13 years of sweat and sacrifice, and carrying this franchise through seasons that had no business being survived, finally had his championship. He never scored a touchdown, not once, in his only Super Bowl. The one game every player on earth sacrifices everything to reach, and Payton never found the end zone. Mike Ditka carried that regret publicly for decades, said it haunted him, said it was one of the worst decisions of his coaching career, and Payton, first man off the bench celebrating for his teammates, no anger, no silence, no carefully constructed smile hiding something darker underneath. His teammates watched him, knowing exactly what that touchdown meant to him, knowing how long he had waited, knowing what he had given to get to that moment, and they couldn't process what they were seeing. Pure joy for everyone else, nothing kept for himself. That moment broke grown men in that locker room, but there's something else, something those same teammates only say quietly, usually years later, because what he did on that field was one thing, what he demanded without ever opening his mouth, that's a completely different story. Nobody wanted to admit it.
The history of running backs in the NFL was rich. Can you share your top 5 greatest running backs of all time?
Like Walter Payton, my favorite all time, but there's so many great running backs, and it all goes on to the system or what you're looking for them to do. You know, you're looking for the great third down back. You're looking for that every down back. So, like, I just always start with Walter Payton and leave it right there because everybody's in the group, but that's the one that just separated itself from the pack to myself, that made me say, yeah. I wasn't fortunate enough to witness Jim Brown, but when you look at the man as a whole, Jim Brown is probably the most impressive running back all time because as a human being, the things he did for our culture, the things he did for the game and our culture, bringing those two together, that takes a manly man to do that.
Men who competed at the highest level this sport has ever seen, and still came up short against number 34 so consistently that eventually the frustration dissolved into something they never expected to feel. Genuine, undeniable, begrudging respect. Not the kind you offer at a retirement ceremony, the kind that gets quietly extracted from you after years of battle, the kind that lives in your bones long after the pads come off, the kind you don't give to a football player, the kind you give to something that transcended the position entirely. Walter Payton ran up that hill every morning because stopping was never an option. He lived the same way off the field. The Walter Payton Foundation wasn't a publicist's idea, wasn't a calculated move to protect an image or satisfy a sponsor. It was built the same way everything Payton did was built, quietly, seriously, with zero interest in recognition. Visiting children's hospitals, championing causes for at-risk youth, showing up in rooms where cameras never followed. The NFL Man of the Year award now carries his name, permanently. The only award in the entire league named after a single player, reserved for those who give back with the same relentless commitment he brought to that hill every morning. He was 45 years old when he died. November 1st, 1999, primary sclerosing cholangitis, a rare, brutal disease that took him far too soon and gave him almost no time to prepare.
Well, you didn't have to coach Walter. I mean, what you had to do for Walter is provide enough opportunities. You had to give him enough touches. You had to get the ball in his hand as a runner or receiver, and then he would make the other stuff happen. I would be the greatest fool in the world to say, I had anything to do with his. No, Walter's greatness came from Walter, and that's what he was. He was class, on and off the field. He was one of our leaders, but he was the practical joker of the football team. I mean, he was always playing jokes on everybody, including me. I mean, he always had these little things he had to do, and that was Walter. He was like a kid in a candy store. He was having fun. So when I first came here in 1982, I'd be late in the office at night. I'd be listening or watching film, and I'd get these strange phone calls, and it would sound like an Hispanic-speaking woman. And she would say, "Coach Ditka, will you meet me at so-and-so and this and that?" Yeah. Well, of course, I never met anybody, but so I never thought too much about it, So I was out on the practice field one day, and I was sitting there, my arms across, I'm watching practice, and I hear this voice behind me, "Coach Ditka, will you meet me at the motel?" And of course, I turn around, it's Walter. And that's the way he was. I mean, he had that high, squeaky voice like a girl anyway, so it was kind of funny.
20,000 fans gathered at Soldier Field for his public memorial, not inside the stadium, outside it, standing in the Chicago cold because they needed to be there, because some people leave a mark on a city so deep that a building isn't large enough to hold the grief. Number 34 never comes down from those rafters, and neither does he. 13 seasons, 1 game missed, 16,726 rushing yards, 133 touchdowns, 21,803 combined yards from scrimmage, 10 seasons of 1,000 yards or more. First ballot Hall of Fame, 1993. Unanimous, numbers that will never be forgotten. But legacy isn't built in numbers. It's built on a hill outside Chicago before sunrise, in a locker room that went silent the moment he walked in. Not from fear, but from something nobody could fully name. A standard he set without raising his voice. An accountability he created without issuing a single demand. He didn't just carry the ball. He carried an entire city, an entire franchise, an entire generation of players who watched him and became better. Not because he told them to, because he showed them what was possible. And when every player who ever faced him, every defender, every rival, every opponent who spent a full week preparing and still came up short, was finally asked to describe Walter Payton in one word, they never said sweetness, they said terrifying. If this story moved you, hit that like button. And if you want more NFL legacy content that goes beyond the highlights, subscribe, because there are more stories like this one, and they deserve to be told.
The guy could throw a football, probably 60 yards, easy. There was a game, Walter Payton came in to play quarterback for the Bears, not like as some joke, not as some gimmick. The guy could do everything.
Walter has a rare liver disease, and it's called primary sclerosing cholangitis, or it's known as PSC. The cause of the disease is unknown.
Are you scared over this?
Am I scared?
Hell yeah, I'm scared. Would you be scared? But what can you do?